I'm going to take you through the tasting now.
Well, actually, what I really wanted to know, we got the most common questions at the start, which is what are the characteristics and flavors of it. So I haven't had the opportunity just yet to be able to taste this particular Fino cask finished whiskey, and I think I'm quite excited now.
Yeah, I think, you know, when we do a tasting, I think there's a couple of important things. There's a big difference between tasting and drinking whiskey. Tasting for me is all about exploring the flavors, getting to know what the whiskey is about, and once you've discovered those flavors, and I mean, I'm going to take you through some descriptors, and I always say to people, you know, again, whiskey's subjective. These are my descriptors for the whiskey. Yes. It's really just to be a guideline to point you in a direction.
Yeah.
And if I say, you know, we're going to find some frig and some fruits in there, and you say I don't get that, I get something else, then, you know, you don't worry about that. It doesn't make me right or you wrong. It just means that, you know, we experience whiskies in different ways. And when we do a tasting, you know, even at a professional level, this is a 48.6 whiskey, so, you know, nose it with pleasure, even have a gentle sip if you wanted to, but we would generally, in a tasting, use room temperature water and normally put the same amount of water into the glass as what there is whiskey. So we break in that whiskey down to around about the 20 to 25% ABV.
Does that make it a little bit more easier to distinguish?
What it does is the little reaction between the water and the alcohol creates a little bit of heat, and that then drives the flavors of the whiskey to the nose of the glass. And this is a very interesting glass. It's called a Norland glass, and if you look at it, it's actually a glass within a glass. It looks as though the whiskey is actually hanging in,
sort of floating
in thin air there.
Yeah.
Because the glass is inside. It was something we discovered last year, and they're exceptionally expensive glasses. So I'm always kind of shaking and handling this with care. I have got two. They've never come out of their tube. I've never even thought that I would, you know, like to try and wash them. But they are a very, very nice glass for doing a tasting with.
Yeah.
And as I say, you know, we can nose it at full alcohol strength. But as I mentioned to you, I always like to just add that dash of water, room temperature, slightly chilled, no ice. In a tasting, if we're using ice, then it tends to bring in the flavors of the whiskey. And you will find that now that you've added that little bit of water, that we've got quite a prominent smokiness coming through, which is due to the peat which was used.
Yeah.
But it's a gentle smoke.
Oh, geez,
and then if you really get in the nose there, and the sort of descriptors I would use for this would be kind of like, you know, the figs, fruits like pineapple, orange peel, you know, a little bit of pepper coming through there, and spice also coming through on the nose. I don't know what you find, if you find anything different in there.
I was going to ask, is there a bit of a note of, definitely getting the spice, but is there a note of any honey in there too?
Could be, yeah, kind of a honeyed sweetness coming through. And if we just take a small little sip, and I had a friend, well, not a friend, he's a very good friend, but also a legend in the industry called Pierre Menkes. And Pierre always said that, you know, when you're appreciating whiskey and you're tasting whiskey, you should hold the whiskey in your mouth for a second for every year of maturation. So for this particular whiskey, let's try what Pierre says.
Just before you take a sip, now, got a bit of a strict policy that I don't drink on the job, but part of the job is drinking for this one. And I'm fascinated to know how much you then drink while doing this on a daily basis, and how much of it, of course, that you have to, spit it.
Yeah, well, it's a good question, because I mean, we will, on average on a day, I would probably look through, you know, 15 to 20 different samples. 99.9% of our decisions which are taken on our whiskies are done organoleptically. In other words, using our senses of smell and taste. We do not rely on, even though we can analyze these through GC machines, gas chromatography chromatography machines. We can see exactly what is in there. We do not make decisions based on that. And coming to say that as well, in that on the decisions, I personally rely a lot more on my nose than I do on my taste. I always think because your nose is more sensitive, you have 5 primary smells over 30 primary nasal smells. And I always say that if it gets past my nose, then I shouldn't have a problem with it on the tasting. So a lot of my decisions first come through the nose and what I experience through that.
And you already tell how good it's going to be?
I really can. And I've got this very annoying habit, which my wife wants to really give me a big bang across the head every time we go out.
You smell everything.
The first thing I do is I always pick the wine glass up or the glass in the restaurant, and I always make sure smell it. I do. It's a habit I've got because I've done so many tastings in faraway places where if it's not been the glasses haven't been clean, or they've been wiped with a damp cloth, or the water quality isn't right. I mean, that's another thing. If you're going to spend 300, 400 plus rand on a bottle of whiskey, there are certain parts of the country where the water is pretty heavily chlorinated. So, do yourself a favor, do a little bit of either a water filter, or pay that extra 10, 15 bucks and get yourself a good bottle of still water to use for your breakdown of your whiskey. And don't forget as well, if you enjoy whiskey with ice and you freeze your tap water, then it's got the same effect as putting chlorinated water in if you're in one of those regions. So just remember that too. If you're going to freeze water, then make sure it's also the still water, which comes out of either a filtered water or it comes out of a bottle which you've bought. Because there's so many times I've seen it where the whiskey gets the blame for circumstances which are totally out of the whiskey's control.
Yeah.
So that's important. So back to your thing about tasting. In works hours, no, we will always spit. We do not taste. In this particular case, I want you to experience the whiskey. So, I'm not expecting you to empty the glass. It's a small little sip. And as we say, as Pia says, let's see if we can hold it there for that 9 seconds. Let it float around your mouth. Let all of your senses, front, back, top and bottom of the tongue, and let everything come into work.
You just want to swirl it around as much as
That's
possible.
right, yeah. Now, what I'm expecting you to find on this one is that, if you leave it in there, you're going to find that the smokiness comes through, but you find the grains have actually softened down the smoke. It's not powerful. You're going to get a little bit. You said honey. I'm on my tasting notes for this, I've got almost like a treacle, which could be the same treacly honey kind of flavor coming through, along with that spiciness, a little bit of tobacco, again coming from the smokiness of the peat. And then also from the pheno, that little playful hint, that nuttiness which
I was going to say there's a bit
which
of
comes through.
Getting a bit of I don't know if it's the right sort of, I don't want to choose a particular nut, but I'm getting a bit of a hazelnutty, but I guess this is nuttiness as a whole.
Could be, hazelnut. Not got a problem with that descriptor. And it's got that long, warm mouthfeel, which has come from maybe the slightly higher alcohol. The 48.6 has given it that nice little mouth-warming feel as it comes at the back.
Lingers as well at the back.
Lingers. It's got a very. I've still got. The peat is hanging around there, the smokiness.
Yeah.
But this isn't as prominent as the Oloroso. The Oloroso last year had a real smoky peaty kick to it, being the single malt. But by using the grains in this one, it's actually softened down, sweetened up that little bit of maltiness which was there.
This is
almost maybe some.
This is beautiful.
Almondy notes coming through too. And the nice thing is when you go back to your whiskey again, you might find that there's something else. Whiskey, even though it's freshly poured in the glass, give it a second or two, allow the whiskey and the water to interact, let it open up. And again now, I'm starting to find that smoke is just settling down a little bit now in the glass.
You'll find a lot of winemakers saying that the right kind of wine to enjoy is with one of those wide brim, champagne makers.
Champagne.
Is with a wine glass, what
Yes.
we regard as a wine glass.
Yep.
Much wider brim, not what has been commercially been sold as the tiny little flutes.
Yeah.
Because you don't let as much of the aroma through, and the liquid doesn't have the chance enough to be able to react and open up in that way, so you can fully enjoy the whole body of it. What would you say then is for you the right kind of glass, or the right kind of width of any container that you're using to drink liquid?
Well, I think,
to drink whiskey.
I think your first point is absolutely right. I had the privilege of attending a tasting presented by a glass supplier, where they actually said what was the correct glass for a particular wine, ranging through from, say, Sauvignon Blanc to a good red, a cab, right the way through to the sparkling wine, and then the spirits and the MCCs, right the way through to the spirits at the end. And what they did was they had their glass design alongside a typical glass. And you could not believe the difference. And like you mentioned now about the MCC or the sparkling wine, the champagne in a flute against it in what some people would say, well, this is a wine glass.
Yeah.
It actually opens it up so much more. And the same with the Sauvignon Blanc. The glass was slightly different and had a different effect. The same with whiskey. When you're tasting, I would look for something with a slightly narrower top than what we've got with the Nolan. In other words, you concentrate those aromas around the point of your nose. You don't give, in a tasting, the opportunity for the whiskies to
escape,
the flavors to escape around you. So you're really trying to concentrate them in the area where you can focus.
Just for tasting, or
just for tasting?
Okay.
I think when you're drinking, then again you look at that typical kind of whiskey goblet, the wider glass, preferably not square glass, because you tend to find then, and through experience I've noticed this, that with the square glass you do that and it runs down the sides. So and nice rounded or even a hexagonal shaped whiskey, something which brings the whiskey to the center of your mouth to be able to swallow. And this one I find the Nolan glass is for me a perfect drinking glass. Ideal, not too big. Even a small dram in here looks like a healthy dram, and there's enough room to add the water. As I say, I would usually just put a few drops of water in my whiskey.
I've managed to sneak in a couple extra cheeky sips because it is just that good. But what I'm realizing afterwards, that aftertaste that lingers, is a slight little touch of tobacco. Definitely just sort of sitting.
And I think that's coming from, some people, it could be almost like a cigar boxy type of tiki wood, that sort of a smell which you get from it. And I think that's, one of the amazing things about whiskey is you can have 10 people around a table, and if you're all honest with each other and you've got 5 different whiskies, I would be very surprised if everybody put their hand up for one.
Yeah.
And it's always interesting to share the kind of experience of a whiskey.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, my tasting notes are a guideline to point somebody in a direction. They're not cast in stone.
Yeah.